When we talk about the platform, we're referring to the technology that makes Google Analytics work, and not just the data and tools you see in your account. There are four main parts of the Google Analytics platform: collection, configuration, processing, and reporting. All four parts work together to help you gather, customize, and analyze your data. Let's take a look at collection first. Collection is all about getting data into your Google Analytics account. To collect data, you need to add Google Analytics code to your website, mobile app, or other digital environment you want to measure. This tracking code provides a set of instructions to Google Analytics, telling it which user interactions it should pay attention to and which data it should collect. The way the data is collected depends on the environment you want to track. For example, you'll use the JavaScript tracking code to collect data from a website, but a software development kit, called an SDK, to collect data from a mobile app. Each time the tracking code is triggered by a user's behavior, like when the user loads a page on a website or a screen in a mobile app, Google Analytics records that activity. First, the tracking code collects data about each activity, like the title of the page viewed. Then, this data is packaged up in what we call a hit. Once the hit has been created, it is sent to Google's collection servers for the next step, data processing. During data processing, Google Analytics transforms the raw data from collection using the settings in your Google Analytics account. These settings, also known as the configuration, help you align the data more closely with your measurement plan and business objectives. For example, you could set up something called a filter that tells Google Analytics to remove any data from your own employees. During processing, Google Analytics would then filter out all of the hits from your employees so that this data wouldn't be used for your report calculations. You can also configure Google Analytics to import data directly into your reports from other Google products like Google AdWords, Google AdSense, and Google Webmaster Tools. You can even configure Google Analytics to import data from non-Google sources like your own internal data. It's during the processing stage that Google Analytics then merges all of these data sources to create the reports you eventually see in your account. It's important to note that once your data has been processed, it cannot be changed. For example, if you set a filter to exclude data from your employees, that data will be permanently removed from your reports and can't be recovered at a later date. After Google Analytics has finished processing, you can access and analyze your data using the reporting interface, which includes easy-to-use reporting tools and data visualizations. It's also possible to systematically access your data using the Google Analytics Core Reporting API. Using the API, you can build your own reporting tools or extract your data directly into third-party reporting tools. You can think of users, sessions, and interactions as a hierarchy. Let's talk through the details of this hierarchy using the analogy of a restaurant. Restaurants have many customers, some that visit for just one meal and some that visit regularly. During each visit, a person can have one or more interactions with the restaurant staff. A customer that checks in with the host and leaves right away because no tables are available has just one interaction during that visit. In another visit, they may check in, get seated, order dinner, and pay the bill. This visit has 4 interactions. Like a restaurant, your website or mobile app also has visitors or users. Some users visit just one time, and some visit multiple times. In Google Analytics, we refer to each visit as a session. Later in this course, we'll talk in greater detail about how Google Analytics identifies the same user across multiple sessions. But for now, it's important to remember 2 things. First, there is a relationship between users and sessions, like the relationship between restaurant customers and their visits. Second, Google Analytics can recognize returning users from multiple sessions over time, just like a restaurant staff recognizes its regular customers. A visit to a restaurant is made up of interactions, like ordering a meal and paying the bill. Similarly, a website or app session is made up of individual interactions. For example, a user might visit your homepage and then leave right away. This session would have one interaction, a page view. In another session, a user might visit your homepage, watch a video, and make a purchase. That session includes 3 interactions. In Google Analytics, we call each individual interaction within a session a hit. There are different types of hits. For example, page views, events, and transactions. Each one is designed to collect a different type of data. The information that's collected is packaged up and sent to the analytics servers via an image request. This image request is the hit. It's the vehicle that transmits the data from your website or mobile app to Google Analytics. Let's look at an example of a small portion of an image request. In the example, everything after the question mark is called a parameter. Each parameter carries a piece of information back to Google's analytics servers. Some of these parameters are encoded and can only be interpreted by Google Analytics. Others are actually human readable, like the parameter UTMUL, which shows the language that the user's browser is set to. Depending on the environment you want to track, a website, mobile app, or other digital experience, Google Analytics uses different tracking technology to create the data hits. For example, there is a specific tracking code to create hits for websites and different code to create hits for mobile apps. In addition to creating hits, the tracking code also performs another critical function. It identifies new users and returning users. We'll explain how the tracking code does this in later lessons. Another key function of the tracking code is to connect your data to your Google Analytics account. This is accomplished through a unique identifier embedded in your tracking code. Here is an example of what the tracking ID looks like. For your own account, you can find the tracking ID in the Account Administrative Settings. To track data from a website, Google Analytics provides a standard snippet of JavaScript tracking code. This snippet references a JavaScript library called analytics.js that controls what data is collected. You simply add the standard code snippet before the closing head tag in the HTML of every web page that you want to track. This snippet generates a page view hit each time a page is loaded. It's essential that you place the Google Analytics tracking code on every page of your site. If you don't, you won't get a complete picture of all the interactions that happen within a given website session. When a user views a page on your site, the web browser begins to render the HTML on the page. It starts at the top of the page and moves towards the bottom. When it gets to your Google Analytics tracking code, the browser automatically triggers the JavaScript. Adding the code snippet to the top of the page before the closing head tag ensures that the Google Analytics code runs, even if a user navigates away from the page before it fully loads. The Google Analytics tracking code executes JavaScript asynchronously, meaning that the JavaScript runs in the background while the browser performs other tasks. This is very important. It means that the Google Analytics tracking code will continue to collect data while the browser renders the rest of the web page. As the tracking code executes, Google Analytics creates anonymous, unique identifiers to distinguish between users. There are different ways an identifier can be created. By default, the Google Analytics JavaScript uses a first-party cookie, but you can also create and use your own identifier. When a page loads, the JavaScript collects information from the website itself, like the URL of the current page. The JavaScript also collects information from the browser, such as the user's language preference, the browser name, and the device and operating system being used to access the site. All of this information is packaged up and sent to Google's servers as a page view hit. This process repeats each time a page is loaded in the browser. Instead of using JavaScript to collect data like you do on a website, you'll use an SDK, or Software Development Kit, to collect the data from your mobile app. There are different SDKs for different operating systems, including Android and iOS. SDKs collect data about your app, like what users look at, the device operating system, and how often a user opens the app. This data gets packaged as hits and sent to your Google Analytics account. This is similar to how the JavaScript code sends hits from a website. Data from mobile apps is not sent to Analytics right away. When a user navigates through an app, the Google Analytics SDK stores the hits locally on the device and then sends them to your Google Analytics account later in a batch process called dispatching. Mobile data collection uses dispatching for two reasons. First, mobile devices can lose network connectivity, and when a device isn't connected to the web, the SDK can't send any hits to Google Analytics. Second, sending data to Google Analytics in real time can reduce a device's battery life. For these reasons, the SDKs automatically dispatch hits every 30 minutes for Android devices and every 2 minutes for iOS devices. But you can customize this time frame in your tracking code to control the impact on the battery life. Another important function of the mobile SDK is differentiating users. When an app launches for the first time, the Google Analytics SDK generates an anonymous, unique identifier for the device, similar to the way the website tracking code does. Each unique identifier is also counted in Google Analytics as a unique user. If the app gets updated to a new version, the identifier on the device remains the same. However, if the app gets uninstalled, the Google Analytics SDK deletes the identifier. If the app is then reinstalled, a new anonymous identifier is created on the device. The result is that the user will be identified as a new user, not a returning user, but no other data in your Google Analytics reports will be impacted. Recall that the Google Analytics JavaScript and mobile SDKs automatically build hits to send data to Google Analytics. However, when you want to collect data from a different device, you must manually build the data collection hits. The measurement protocol defines how to construct the hits and how to send them to Google Analytics. For instance, let's say we want to collect data from a kiosk. Here's a sample hit that will track when a user views a screen on the kiosk. Notice there is a parameter in the hit that contains the screen resolution. This particular parameter will become the dimension screen resolution during processing. The value in the parameter will end up in the screen resolutions report. Like the JavaScript and mobile SDKs, which include a tracking ID with each hit, you must also add a tracking ID to every hit you send to Google Analytics. This will ensure that the data appears in your specific analytics account and property. All of the parameters that you can include in the hit are explained in the Analytics developer documentation. During processing, there are 4 major transformations that happen to the data. You can control parts of these transformations using the configuration settings in your properties and your views. First, Google Analytics organizes the hits you've collected into users and sessions. There is a standard set of rules that Google Analytics follows to differentiate users and sessions, but you can customize some of these rules through your configuration settings. Second, data from other sources can be joined with data collected via the tracking code. For example, you can configure Google Analytics to import data from Google AdWords, Google AdSense, or Google Webmaster Tools. You can even configure Google Analytics to import data from other non-Google systems. Third, Google Analytics processing will modify your data according to any configuration rules you've added. These configurations tell Google Analytics what specific data to include or exclude from your reports, or change the way the data is formatted. Finally, the data goes through a process called aggregation. During this step, Google Analytics prepares the data for analysis by organizing it in meaningful ways and storing it in database tables. This way, your reports can be generated quickly from the database tables whenever you need them. First, let's talk about how Google Analytics creates users. The first time a device loads your content and a hit is recorded, Google Analytics creates a random unique ID that is associated with the device. Each unique ID is considered to be a unique user in Google Analytics. This unique ID is sent to Google Analytics in each hit, and every time a new ID is detected, Google Analytics counts a new user. When Google Analytics sees an existing ID in a hit, it counts a returning user. It's possible for these IDs to get reset or erased. This happens if a user clears their cookies in a web browser or uninstalls and then reinstalls a mobile app. In these scenarios, Google Analytics will set a new unique ID the next time the device loads your content. Because the ID for the device is no longer the same as it was before, a new user gets counted instead of a returning user. The unique ID that Google Analytics automatically sets is specific to every device, but you can customize how Google Analytics creates and assigns the ID. Rather than using the random numbers that the tracking code creates, you can override the unique ID with your own number. This lets you associate user interactions across multiple devices. Now let's talk about how Google Analytics creates sessions. A session in Google Analytics is a collection of interactions, or hits, from a specific user during a defined period of time. These interactions can include page views, events, or e-commerce transactions. A single user can have multiple sessions. Those sessions can occur on the same day or over several days, weeks, or months. As soon as one session ends, there is then an opportunity to start a new session. But how does Google Analytics know that a session has ended? By default, a session ends after 30 minutes of inactivity. We call this period of time the session timeout length. If Google Analytics stops receiving hits for a period of time longer than the timeout length, the session ends. The next time Google Analytics detects a hit from the user, a new session is started. Here's a simple illustration of what sessions might look like in the real world. Let's say a user searches for something on google.com and clicks one of the search results. When they land on the web page, a new user is detected, a page view hit is collected, and the session begins. If the user clicks to another page on the same site, the new page view hit is sent to Google Analytics and processed as part of the same session. But let's say the user leaves their computer for 2 hours. When they return to their computer and click to a new page on the same site, a new session will begin. Google Analytics automatically ends the first session because too much time passed without receiving any hits. In this scenario, Google Analytics will process the data as 2 separate sessions. While this data is not normally collected by Google Analytics, you might have it stored in an internal system. With dimension widening, you could import author and topic as new dimensions for your content pages. You could use each article's page URL as the key that links the new data to the existing Google Analytics data. Once added, author and topic would be treated just like any other dimensions in Google Analytics. You could add these dimensions to custom reports, dashboards, or segments. For example, you can create a filter to exclude traffic from a particular IP address or to convert messy page URLs into readable text. During processing, Google Analytics checks each data hit against your filters. If a hit matches the logic in a filter, that data is modified. If you exclude traffic from a specific IP address, for example, any hit coming from that IP address will be permanently removed from your report data. Another way to transform your data is to set up goals. When you set up goals, Google Analytics creates new metrics for your reports, like conversions and conversion rates. Goals let you specify which page views, screen views, or other hits should be used to calculate conversions. You can, for example, set up a goal to track newsletter signups. Each time a user completes a sign-up, a conversion is logged in your Google Analytics account. Using the conversion metrics, you can analyze whether or not you're meeting your business objectives. Grouping is another way you can transform your data. With grouping, you can aggregate certain pieces of data together so you can analyze the collective performance. You can create two types of groups in Google Analytics: channel groups and content groups. A channel group is a collection of common marketing activities. For example, display advertising, social media, email marketing, and paid search are 4 common channel groups that are each a roll-up of several marketing activities. Content groups are like channel groups, except you use them to create and analyze a collection of content. For example, if you're an e-commerce business, you might want to group all of your product pages together, like t-shirts, jeans, and hats, into a group called product pages, and group all of your content pages, like blog posts, together into another group called content pages. This would let you quickly see how well the product pages group and the content pages group each performed in aggregate. All of your configuration settings, including filters, goals, and grouping, are applied to your data before it goes through aggregation, the final step of data processing. During aggregation, Google Analytics creates and organizes your report dimensions into tables, called aggregate tables. Google Analytics pre-calculates your reporting metrics for each value of a dimension and stores them in the corresponding table. When you open a Google Analytics report, a query is sent to the aggregate tables that are full of this prepared data and returns the specific dimensions and metrics for the report. Storing data in these tables makes it faster for your reports to access data when you request it. When viewing your data in a standard Google Analytics report, the first column you see in the table contains the values for a dimension, and the rest of the columns display the corresponding metrics. Most often, you'll use the Google Analytics reporting interface to access your data, since it's easy to use for a majority of your reporting and analysis needs. You can think of this interface as a layer on top of your data that allows you to organize, segment, and filter your data with a set of analysis tools. In addition to the reporting interface, you can use an API, or Application Programming Interface, to extract your data directly from Google Analytics. Using the APIs, you can programmatically add analytics data to your custom applications, like an internal dashboard. This can help you automate and customize the reporting process for your business. Most of the time, when you request data from the reporting interface or the APIs, you'll receive your data almost immediately. But in some cases, where you request complex data, Google Analytics uses a process called sampling. Sampling helps Google Analytics retrieve your data faster, so there's not a long delay between when you request the data and when you receive it. Dimension of a session is the traffic source that brought the user to your site. And a dimension of an interaction a user takes on your site could be the name of the page they viewed. Metrics are the quantitative measurements of your data. They count how often things happen, like the total number of users on a website or app. Metrics can also be averages, like the average number of pages users see during a session on your website. Most commonly, you'll see dimensions and metrics reported in a table, with the first column containing the values for one particular dimension, and the rest of the columns displaying the corresponding metrics. However, not every metric can be combined with every dimension. Each dimension and metric has a scope that aligns with a level of the analytics data hierarchy: user, session, or hit level. In most cases, it only makes sense to combine dimensions and metrics in your reports that belong to the same scope. For example, the count of visits is a session-based metric, so it can only be used with session-level dimensions, like traffic source or geographic location. It would not be logical to combine the count of visits metric with the hit level dimension, like page title. Here's another example. The metric time on page is a hit level metric. It measures how long users spend on a page of your site. It is not possible to use this metric with the session level dimension, like traffic source or geographic location. For example, you can use the APIs to integrate your own business data with Google Analytics and build custom dashboards. To use the reporting APIs, you have to build your own application. This application needs to be able to write and send a query to the reporting API. The API uses the query to retrieve data from the aggregate tables and then sends a response back to your application containing the data that was requested. Each query sent to the API must contain specific information, including the ID of the view that you would like to retrieve data from, the start and end dates for the report, and the dimensions and metrics you want. Within the query, you can also specify how to filter, segment, and order the data, just like you can with the tools in the online reporting interface. You can think of the data that gets returned from the API as a table with a header and a list of rows. The header describes the name and data type of each column. These are either the dimension or metric names. Each row contains the actual values for the dimensions and metrics that you requested in your query. During processing, Google Analytics prepares the data for your standard reports by pre-calculating it and then storing it in aggregate tables. This lets Google Analytics quickly retrieve the data you request without sampling. However, there might be times when you want to modify one of the standard reports in Google Analytics by adding a segment, secondary dimension, or another customization. Or you might want to create a custom report with a completely new combination of dimensions and metrics. When you make any of these kinds of custom requests, either through the reporting interface or the reporting APIs, Google Analytics inspects the set of aggregate tables to see if the request can be met using the data that's already been processed and is in the tables. If it can't, Google Analytics goes back to the raw session data to process your request on the fly. When this happens, Google Analytics checks to see how many sessions should be included in your request. If the number of sessions is small enough, Google Analytics can calculate the data for your request using all of the sessions. If the number of sessions is too large, Google Analytics uses a sample to fulfill the request. Google Analytics sets a maximum number of sessions that can be used to calculate your reports. If you go over that limit, your data gets sampled. One way to stay below the limit is to shorten the date range in your report, which reduces the number of sessions Google Analytics needs to calculate your request. Google Analytics Premium also offers an unsampled reporting feature that will pull unsampled data for custom requests, even for large reports that exceed the sampling limit.